This show is brought to you by Female Alliance Media, by women, for women.
Hello. This is Becca. I'm host of the Go Be Great podcast. There's no such thing as TMI here, so join me as we chat and meet amazing humans having conversations about life, confidence, and more without the filter. Come hang weekly as I shed light on the topics we often feel we need to hide, as we discuss the ebbs and flows of what learning about what being great really looks like. Let's be great together. Tune in for new episodes every Wednesday.
Hello, and welcome to the Say It Out Loud podcast. I am your host, Christine Daynard, and the goal of this podcast is to encourage you to live your best and most authentic life by digging deeper and finding connection through vulnerability. I believe we have been taught that vulnerability is a weakness, when in fact, it is our superpower. In this space, I will share personal stories and conversations with others so you can be empowered by their strength and inspired to take action in your own life. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's get started. Well, hey, welcome back to the podcast. It's me, Christine D, and I have a solo episode for you today. In fact, I'm just going to talk about an experience that is literally happening in the moment. And one thing you might even notice about this episode is that if you're paying attention and you're an avid listener who looks for the podcast drops every Wednesday, you'll notice that this podcast is dropping on a Thursday. And the reason it's dropping on a Thursday, I'm going to tell you in this podcast episode, because not only is it dropping on a Thursday, but I'm recording it the day before it's going to drop. Now, if you know anything about podcasts, or if you've picked up from listening to either mine or other people's podcasts, you know that often we're planning episodes way ahead of time, right? So we know that if we want to have episodes in our calendar for the next month, we don't have to stress about it. Then we're setting up those interviews kind of like, for me anyways, this is what I do. I set them up earlier in the month and then have those chats and interviews. And then I have some time to be able to edit them and get them into the roster so that they go out when I'm ready for them to go out on schedule. And so sometimes though, life gets in the way. Right? So as you know, if you've been listening for any length of time, you know that I self-produce this podcast. Amongst all the other things I'm looking to do to build my small business, to build this offer and this way that I'm helping women in the world today, I am working on all the pieces. And if you've ever built a small business or a side gig, or, you know, you've had dreams of doing it, you've started to do your research, you know that it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time and effort to put toward this thing that you're building. And there are a lot of parts. And when you're first getting started, you don't have that full team behind you yet because you're not quite ready at the stage for the team, but you are the team. Right now, I am the team. So I am doing the production of the podcast, which is definitely more involved than I ever thought when I first got myself involved in podcasting. But because I love it so much, I am willing to do it until there's a moment where I have an opportunity I can pass it on to somebody else to help me with that. Right? So for now, I'm self-producing, but I'm also building this business, this amazing opportunity and way that I am building a community to support women in helping them find their joy and helping them feel better about themselves, in building their confidence, in using their voice. You know, this is something that a lot of us as women, we get tripped up in a lot of things. We get tripped up in a lot of things. And we somehow think that we're the ones that have to do all the things, that we, people have the highest expectations of us, and we somehow have to keep everything rolling because that's our job. And if we don't do it perfectly and we don't do all the things exactly when we're supposed to do them or when other people expect that we're going to do them, we are somehow a failure. So I am here to break that thought, that mindset, that place that we all seem to fall into. And it's really hard to get ourselves out of fully, and it does take time, but it is possible. I'm certain of it. Is that we have been taught to show this perfect side of ourselves. I mean, this is what feeds the internet, right? It's like all these perfect, that's the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. It's like we have been designed to create this illusion of perfection. And what's funny is that as we try to create this illusion of perfection, we then in turn have other people watching us, and then they think that they have to be perfect. And then it just keeps rolling along, right? It's like tumbleweed. It's just picking up more weeds as it goes, and it's building and growing and growing and growing. And now everybody thinks that they have to show up and do all of the things and be perfect in all of the things. And it's ridiculous. You know, we're in a place in the world, we're doing a lot of things, and there is a lot going on. There is no way we're going to be able to do all of the things as well as live a relatively sane life, find little spaces for joy for ourselves, and enjoy the journey, because guess what? We only get one shot at this, right? And I think it's like, I'm 47, and I think when you hit this pint of life, no, I'm not a pint anymore. But when you hit this point of life, you start to realize that you have less time left than you had coming in, right? So it's like, I've had 47 years, and it's like, I hope I'm going to be here for a lot longer, because I feel I have a lot more to do. But, it becomes really real when you're coming up to 50, or, you're coming up to 60. My mom would say when you're coming up to 70, it's like everything, you realize how much less time you have and how much more important it is to enjoy the journey. So some of you, if you're listening and you're younger, maybe you're not on this path yet, or maybe you are. Maybe it's not really an age thing. Maybe that's an old thought process. Maybe that's an old, belief or idea that is now shifting, is that we realize, and maybe it's because of the pandemic, we realize that we only have so much time, right? And we never know when that's going to end. We never did, but somehow, we tend to roll along, and we're pretending we're happy. We're doing all these things we don't want to do. We're kind of miserable. We're not talking about it. We're not saying it out loud. And then we wonder why we're miserable, resentful, and why we have a mental health crisis on our hands, right? So I'm recording this podcast because this week, this is what's happened. This is why you're getting a day delayed podcast episode, and you're getting an episode I'm recording the day before, which is not very, not typical of what I do. I'm usually ahead of the game. I usually have a few under my belt, so I don't have to, ever feel like I need to come in and make something up and feel pressure to put in an episode. So that's where this story comes in. So this week, and actually I would say late last week on Thursday, I launched what I'm calling the Authenticity Launchpad, which is a 6-woman cohort of women that are going to work with me in this small group, in this community that I'm building. So before this community is ready, I am hosting this group of 6 women who want to change their life and feel more joy, feel more energy, feel like themselves again, feel like they can use their voice, build their confidence, help them reintroduce themselves to themselves, because this is what happens. We have children, we get married, we do all the things. And often we're doing a lot of things we don't really want to do, but we do them anyway because we feel like we should. And then we end up in this place in our life where we go, holy shit, who am I anyway? Right? No wonder we can't find joy. No wonder we're full of anxiety. No wonder we're living in this mental health crisis, is because we're all running around trying to do all these things, and we don't really know how to follow the compass inside of us. We don't really know how to, breathe and lean back in and just surrender and say, whoa, like, it's good, man. Like, it's going to come. I don't have to run after all these things and meet all these marks, because who's making the rules anyway? Who decided that when you make a decision and you commit to something, you absolutely have to see it all the way through? I mean, sure, commitment is good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you should never commit to something and never follow through. Follow through is awesome. But sometimes life happens in the middle of things, right? Sometimes shit happens, and you have to just deal with it when it comes. You have to evaluate in a second and go, hold on a second. If I want to do and can do and have to do all of these things, something's got to go for the moment, right? This happens all the time. It's not something new. And as women, you'll understand this if you're a woman listening to this, is that we have more on our plates than most people do, right? Because we are now not only taking care of our families and all of the things and trying to make ourselves happy in some way. Usually, actually, that's the last thing on the list. But we're now also working full time. Most of us are working full time, managing the family, managing the kids, doing all this stuff. And where did the fun go? Why aren't we having any fun anymore? When did life get so serious? Why did we end up with all of these commitments and all of these things that we have to do? And we become a little resentful with the life that we have because we somehow along the line lost our way in an ability to tap into our joy. So this story is important today. So let me get to the point. You know me, I'm a bit of a talker. So here's the point. So last Thursday, I launch that I'm going to be hosting this 6-week, 6-woman, authenticity launchpad is what I'm calling it. And we're going to work together and we're going to tap into joy. And these women are going to leave this 6 weeks and they're going to have shifted some of the ways that they look at things. They're going to have shifted their heart a little bit. They're going to have shifted that joy center, and they're going to better be able to evaluate what comes next for them, because they're going to be able to lean in a little bit more to what they really want, while still, living in the same circumstances that they're in, but they're going to be able to do it in a slightly different way because they're looking at things differently, right? Sometimes we get so trapped and tripped up with where we are, and we stay on repeat because we don't know anything different. We just keep doing what we're doing. And then all of a sudden one day we realize that we're kind of miserable and we don't understand why. And now I think, especially after these last 3 years, no wonder we're miserable. Like, that was already happening. And then the pandemic happened. And let's not even talk about that. I mean, really, I don't want to bring that up, but it's a reality. It's this experience we've all been through that no one's really talking about, funnily enough. But like, we went through this time where we stayed at home. We couldn't see people. We couldn't connect. There was no community. We weren't talking about things. We were afraid to say what was on our hearts and minds because you might get your head chopped off somewhere if you said the wrong thing, right? So anyway, so here we are in the world, and we're all trying to find our way. And I find that more than not, especially the women that I'm talking to, are in this state of, that's how I'm describing it, the state of, and I think you know what I mean. If you're listening to this and you can see yourself in it, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, so I wasn't really trying to pitch you on this whole idea, but if you're interested, by the way, just let me know. DM me, send me an email, send me a message somewhere. I'd be happy to chat with you more about this Authenticity Launchpad. It's going to be great. But here's the thing. That wasn't really the purpose of this talk. The talk is about the fact that because I was building up to this launch, and because I launched it on Thursday, and I ended up, my friend, she was moving to Florida with her family, and it just so happened that their moving day was Friday. And, I didn't know how much help she would need in those last couple of days being here, right? Like, I didn't know how far behind, she was finding herself because she was overwhelmed with this huge move. Like, it's one thing to move across the city or to another city. It's a whole other thing to move into a new country, right? And so as she was preparing, she realized that on Thursday that she really needed some help. And I had just launched this Launchpad, and I was answering messages about it, and there was lots of excitement and energy around it, and people were excited, and they're reaching out to me, and I'm responding to those. And then I also get this SOS from my friend who really needs my help, right? So I'm like, okay, like, I'm on it because I've got 48 hours left with this girl, and of course I want to help her. She's one of my favorite people. And I really wanted to be able to help her and be there for her. But it was like, okay, how do I do both? So I just had to trust a little and say, okay, I'm going to let the energy continue about the launch. I'm going to tap in and help this friend of mine and do with her until we don't have to do anymore. And then I will respond to things when I get a chance to respond to things, because I need the balance here. This is not something I was planning. If I'd planned it better, I probably should have launched on a Tuesday, if I'm quite honest. But regardless, that's what happened. So you can imagine now I'm a couple days behind in catching up with people. And then I've spent the last couple of days on phone calls with women or Zoom calls with women, having discussions about what this Launchpad's going to look like and how it might help them, and answering their questions and having those conversations. So really my time has been really eaten up in a way that I wasn't really expecting, right? I wasn't expecting to lose that 48 hours in the work while instead helping out a friend, which, again, I was happy to do. I wanted to do that, but it was something I wasn't expecting, right? And this happens in life all the time. And so instead of letting it stress me out, I just, like I said, I surrendered, and I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to respond to these messages when I have a minute. And for now, I'm going to put focus on my friend and help her and support her and help her get her out of here, right? So that's what I did. And so I've spent now the last couple of days on these conversations, and it ate up the rest of my schedule. And so as a result of all of that, I had 2 podcast episodes that I was going to be ready to release. One was going to be today that I'm recording this, so the Wednesday when it normally drops, and the other one was going to come out next week. Well, because I was so far behind and all of these things, I ended up having to put off the editing of the podcast and setting it up and getting it ready to go and be scheduled. That it was the 11th hour last night, like literally 11 o'clock last night. I'm like, oh my gosh, I still haven't edited the podcast episode for tomorrow. Let's get to work. And so I was ready to do that. And so I hop into my software and I pop in my memory card and I start listening to the episode with this interview that I had. And it literally sounds like the conversation is happening in a tin can down the hallway. And I'm like, oh my God, what happened? Like, what is happening here? And I check everything. I check the SD card. I'm like checking all the different things that I know to do, which isn't a lot. I'm a self-produced podcaster. I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode. I self-produce, so I'm doing it all. And so I think that I know what I'm doing to kind of balance the episode a little bit better, make it sound better, but like nothing is working. Nothing will help this episode. And I'm not super techie. Like if you're out there and you understand what I'm saying, like I push the play and record button and the stop button and I talk into a microphone and then I take the SD card out and I pop it on my computer and I download the episode or upload the episode to my computer. And I've learned how to use the software there, but like it's basic. Like I live in basic town when it comes to technology, right? And so you're probably feeling my pain. So I'm trying to figure this out. And of course, there's nothing I can do to make the episode better. And I can't figure out what's going on. So I'm like, okay, you know what? That episode aside, I'll leave that one till the following week. And I will do the one that I recorded. It was a solo podcast that I had recorded like the week before or 2 weeks before. And so I uploaded that one. And the same thing happened in that episode. And, I'm a big believer in it doesn't have to be perfect, which is what this conversation is about. But it was so bad and so tin canny down the hall that it would have been painful for you as a listener to listen to. And I was in pain listening to it because it was really hard. Like you really had to kind of like tweak your ears just to be able to hear it. And it was awful. So I couldn't possibly put that out into the world. It just was not going to be for your ears. And so here I am last night. Now I've spent half an hour reviewing these 2 different episodes, realizing that I'm stuck, right? And next thing you know, I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Tomorrow is podcast drop day, and I don't have a podcast episode to go in there. And so I just kind of, just dropped into my heart a little bit. And I was like, okay, Christine, let's think about this realistically, on the theme that I was just saying a few minutes ago, which is like, we feel like we always have to do all the things and we've committed to these things and we have to do them and they need to be on time. And we put all this stress on ourselves about all the things. And then something comes into our life and it throws everything a little off balance just because that's life, right? And so we can't get to all the things, no matter how much we plan for them, no matter what we try to do, sometimes they just don't come together. So I had a talk with myself last night and I was like, you know what? I could easily just sit here right now and record an episode and pump it out for tomorrow. But here's the thing. This is an authenticity podcast. This is where we have authentic chats. This is where I speak to you from the heart. So if I had jumped in at midnight last night and started recording an episode, it would have been because I felt like I had to. Because I had promised that I was going to have an episode every Wednesday morning. And now there's not an episode there. So now I'm being forced to talk to the microphone and come up with something. And I got to tell you, that's not how it works for me. And if I did that, I wouldn't be showing up the way that I normally show up for you. I wouldn't be showing up in that authentic spirit, the speaking from the heart, the letting the conversation just flow through me because there was no pressure in the conversation. I don't believe in pressure conversations. I think they're not needed. They're not required, right? And so if I had put pressure on myself in that situation, I probably would have pumped something out, but you know what would have happened? It wouldn't have been authentic. And it wouldn't have been just an honest, comfortable discussion from the heart that I'm sharing with you right now as I've gone through this experience. And I realized that was going to have to be okay. But I'll tell you the truth is that I decided that and I go to bed And I'm tossing and turning, and in my head is just, I'm rolling it around in my head like, Christine, what were you thinking? And how did you not go to edit this podcast earlier? And, you promised people this would be out every Wednesday morning, and now it's not out there. And how's this going to look? And, people look for this and they rely on you for this, and now it's not even going to be there for them. You're going to look like a flake. Those are the things that are running through my head. Maybe you can identify with this. When something goes wrong in your world, you have this self batter that you beat yourself up with. And that's what I was doing. And I caught myself because I really truly believe that the first thing is we have to recognize and notice in ourselves when we're having these conversations with ourselves. And words matter. Words matter if they're spoken out loud. Words matter if they're in your head. And they especially matter when they are to yourself. And so I caught myself in this moment, and I decided to do a little short meditation, really just breathing my way through it, and just, kept repeating the mantra, I can't change it. I'm not going to stress myself out over it. It can be a day late. It's not the end of the world. The world is not going to fall apart if I don't get an episode out there. And it brought me such relief, and I must have fallen asleep right away because I don't remember after that staying awake. So it definitely worked, relieved myself of this expectation I had put upon myself that in the moment I just simply couldn't adhere to, not in the way that I promised to show up in this space. So I honored myself, and I stopped my bad self-talk to me and instead showed myself some love and honored and gave myself grace, because that's what I needed in that moment, because I can't do it all the time. And, I had a business that I closed after 5 years because in the pandemic, it was so hard to keep that business afloat. And I burnt the candle down so far on the wax on that wick that I had nothing left. I burnt myself out in the process of trying to make things amazing and perfect when everything was seriously a shitstorm. And it has taken me the better half of the majority of the last, since December until, probably even March, April, somewhere in there, to actually come out of that cloud of this burnout that I was feeling all last year. And so for me, it's like, I'm not going back there. Right? I'm not going back to burning myself out at both ends to get things done. Where did that get me? It got me a closed business and restarting again, which partly at first, sure, was very frustrating because you're like, why is this happening to me? And then you go through the healing of it. And I've gone through so much shift and change that I realized that, there's a big silver lining there. I had bigger work to do. I had this podcast to create. I had a community to build, and I want to really support women in finding their way, because there's not a lot of things out there that really support women. It's just not a thing. Women's research is the last to be produced. No one talks about perimenopause. No one talks about these hard things, and no one says things out loud because we're embarrassed and we're worried, but people are going to judge us for how we show up. But here's the thing. If we start showing up differently, and we don't succumb to the societal expectation of I must commit and stay committed and do all the things, and I must do what everybody else is doing in order to make my mark, right? Do you hear where I'm going with this? I can chart my own path, and I can show not only myself, but other people that you can still do amazing things and not be perfect, not be on the 100% mark, right? I mean, why are we doing this to ourselves? And when are we going to acknowledge that there needs to be a shift? We need to change this in ourselves, or we're all going to be burnt out. There is a reason we're in the state that we are right now. And we're bouncing around, we're doing all these things, and we can't possibly do everything all the time. So I decided that it was going to wait until later today. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to wait till something strikes me. And I'm not going to just go out there and talk about nothing. I'm going to let the story come to me, and I'm going to share from my heart in the way that I do in this space. And that's what I'm doing. And this feels a whole lot better than rushing myself to the microphone last night while I'm half asleep close to midnight to record a podcast episode just so I can beat the deadline. So I hope that there's something in this little lesson for you. I hope that you'll start paying attention to the words that you say to yourself, to the expectations that you're holding yourself to, and to how you move through it when things aren't working, right? I really truly believe that, because we can't do all the things all the time, and because we're meant for more than just being button pushers and pushing things along in their deadlines, there's so much more at work here. And sometimes these things have to take their time. And everything will boil out in the wash. Like that phrase doesn't make any sense, but I like to make up phrases that don't make sense. But basically everything will wash out, right? Everything eventually will wash out. And the things that were super important will eventually get done. And the things that really aren't important may just fall off the list. That's the way that it works. That's prioritization. This is me just looking at it from a different perspective and allowing you to recognize in yourself that you can find some grace for you, but perfection is not required. So let's stop being hard on ourselves. Let's stop beating ourselves up for not being able to do all the things. And, I think in this world, there is so much going on. And we've been putting our feelings aside for a really long time. Not just these last few years, but for a long time. We haven't been asking for what we want. We haven't been going after what's important to us. We haven't been putting the things on hold that we really know deep in ourselves that we should be putting on hold for us because it's just not the right time, but we push forward anyway. We know when we are pushing the line to get something done when nothing is working, but we're determined to make it work and everything keeps falling apart and it makes us feel even worse. And that is because we are pushing against what is actually right for us, right? We don't have to do it all. We don't have to do all the things. We don't have to keep up with the Joneses. Just because Laura over there is doing that thing doesn't mean that I, Christine, have to do that thing too. If it's going to work for her, it may not work for me. Why do I keep pushing the line and doing something that is going to have this external validation instead of feeling right in our bodies, in our movement, in the way that we're moving our lives forward, in the impact that we're making on the world, in the conversations we're having every day? There's like a huge ripple effect to how we treat ourselves, right? So I hope that this lands on you in some way that's helpful. And you know what? Shit happens, right? Let's just bring that phrase back because it really does. And sometimes we just can't control it. So let's stop stressing about the small things. Let's just, when things don't work out, we'll just let them go. We'll just be able to acknowledge that it's not always possible to have all the things happen. And that's real life. Not this facade or this pretend life that some of us are living to make sure that everybody thinks that everything's all right when it's really not. Let's lean in and take care of ourselves. Let's do the things that make us feel good. And let's do the things that help us have a healthier and a happier life moving forward instead of just feeling like we're checking boxes all the time. So, may this stick with you, may you find seeds in it, and may you have an awesome day. I'll see you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode. I'd like to invite you to hit the subscribe button on this podcast so you'll be notified when the next one drops. And if you like this episode, please leave a review as it will help others to find this message. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at It's Me, Christine D, or if you'd like to connect about being a guest on the show or talk to me about speaking engagements, please visit itsmechristined.ca. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.